Hi, I'm Joe Silva, and I help entrepreneurs build their team, create systems, and the identity behind being that CEO for their business. I joined Laurie-Ann's program because I have always enjoyed speaking and felt comfortable doing it. The reason I joined the program is because it was a little intimidating to think of myself as a speaker. I had a lot of doubt and I had a lot of ideas in my mind and a lot of things to share, of course, as a lot of entrepreneurs do. I didn't know how to put that into a concise, tight fit for something like a speech. Knowing Laurie-Ann was an expert in the field and has for years and years and years of experience doing this, thought what better way to learn than to learn from the best. After going through Laurie-Ann's program, I have this structure that I can use really anytime I need it in order to give the speech. Number two is I have the confidence to approach organizations and say, hey, I can give a speech. It's coherent, it's concise, it's a consistent message, and the format is one that I know is solid because it's what Laurie-Ann teaches. So highly recommend to get your message out there. Recommend Laurie-Ann as your go-to. She's the expert. So use the expert, go to the best, learn from the best, and you'll be glad you did.
Today, I'm bringing on a guest. I was introduced to her. She's on the other side of the globe. Thank you, Internet. But her and I have something in common, which is the losing of our husbands. So we have grief in common. And I remember very early on in my speaking when people said, "Tell me your story." And I would share with them a little bit about this fact that I was a young widow, and somebody saying to me, "That's already been done. You'll never make any money at it." And she pivoted and walked away from me. And I thought, that wasn't really what I wanted to speak about. And my guest today has been on a mission to really share with people that there is joy with grief. And I can hardly wait for you to listen in on this conversation as we talk everything about speaking and books and relationships and how you get on more stages. So let's dive into the show. Marie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. And our paths crossed because of a good friend of mine, Steve Gamlin. And unfortunately, we have things in common. And there are other things, I would say, more fortunately, that we have in common. So,
Hello.
uh, would you just like introduce yourself to my audience? Even tell them
Sure.
you're fortunate.
Sure.
Thumb and parts.
So I'm Alessi. I'm a grief advocate. I do grief coaching and speaking, and I run workshops and retreats. And everything I do in my life is about bringing lightness into grief, and the why we will unpack in this podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I love the fact that you are an advocate for like a different side of grief that most people don't think of. When they think of grief, they think of it's sadness. Yeah, it's sadness, it's heaviness, it's I lost someone that I loved. And grief is so much more than just losing that special someone in your life. And I've worked with several like grief advocates and helped them write speeches. And so that's how I've learned a lot. And, people in my audience who are listening to this podcast know that I, became a widow at the age of 36 after my first husband and I were only married for 8 months.
Wow.
So unfortunately, we have a lot in common. So if you could take me back, rewind the button before you became a grief advocate, what were you doing? What was your life?
I was already in coaching, but it was more on the side of mindset. And I work with a lot of young business owners. I don't even know why I say young. I must have been way young. I'm talking more about the business was mostly young. So it was all about the transitioning phase. So I started off with moms going back into the workforce, and then the businesses got bigger and bigger, more and more established. But everything I did was about helping people with their personal growth to achieve business growth, because we all know there are the hurdles usually come from your personal story, from the growth that still has to happen, because we need to be that person who can be that successful in business. It's hardly ever about more strategies and more, sales techniques, etc. All of that is important. But if you don't do the inner work, the personal growth, you are not ever going to break through that glass ceiling. And that was my little forte, to come in and help people believe in themselves and make those choices and grow up to that person they wanted to be to run their business.
Oh, 100%. I used to say to my clients when I was like a newer coach, I used to say what got you here won't get you there before Malcolm Goldwell, like ever
Yeah.
said it or came out with his book. Because I had looked back at my own life and the things that I wanted, I was, it's just like I'm not the person who has them yet. Like, what do I have to do to become that person? And as we are towards the end of 2025, like those are the questions that I'm asking myself is who is the 2026 version of Laurie-Ann? Like, who will I become over the next 12 months? So were you speaking back then?
I was. And I remember I was quite involved in Business in Heels, which is an international networking function for women. And I spoke quite a bit for them. And I was on their first speaker panel they did in Australia. And I quite loved speaking. But to me, speaking was mostly, when I look back now, and I'm thinking, oh, I called that speaking. And so I don't want to talk down on it at all, because it was my starting point and my practicing ground. But they were mostly, when you go to networking functions, we're talking like 30 to 50 people in the audience, And when I look back now, I remember I started a networking function myself because I live in between two big cities, Sydney and Wollongong. Sydney, most people will know. Wollongong, maybe not so much. It's between two big cities, and we are this country town. There's so many small businesses, but no networking function. You always have to go to the bigger cities. So a friend of mine and I decided we are going to start a networking function. And we had around 50 people in the room. And I remember I went to Toastmasters to prepare myself to get past that nervousness. I never had an issue speaking. And most people are like, oh, I can't speak, or I'm scared of public speaking. We're not. We're scared of the judgment that could come from the audience, because we can all speak. We speak all day, nothing that needs to be trained. Maybe how you word things, maybe how you present yourself on stage. But the fear mostly comes from judgment, not from speaking. And that's a little nuance that is really important to highlight. So I took myself to Toastmasters because I thought that's where I get past that nervousness. That's where I drop the and which a lot of us do when we are nervous. I still throw it in every now and then, but it's definitely nothing compared to what I used to do. Cut a long story short, there was this beautiful moment, and I know I've shared it with you, and this is probably where you wanted me to lead it to. This beautiful moment where my husband and I were getting ready. The boys were already outside. And I was standing there in front of the mirror, and I had this split second of a vision where I thought I saw myself speaking in front of thousands and thousands of people. And it was exhilarating and it was scary as. And I shared the vision with my husband. I said, I keep having this vision. It kept coming up for me of me speaking in front of like 100,000 people. And he was kneeling on the floor, tying up his shoelaces, and he looked at me. He had this biggest smile on his face and said, I can still see you do that, babe. And I'm like, of course he would say that. He was always my biggest supporter. I loved it. And we went on with our day, and I completely forgot about that until the moment where I stood and held my husband's eulogy. So there's a whole lot of story in between, but I'm going to jump straight to that point. Because there were 500 people in the audience, not 100,000, but 500 at Rob's funeral. And I had this vision come back, and like, there it is. It's the starting point. And it was so subtle because obviously my focus was on something very different that day. But standing up on that stage and looking into the audience, and there was tiered seating. So it literally felt like sitting around the fireplace, but with 500 people. And I looked at every single one of them. I remember how important it was for me to have that connection with every single person. And what I shared with them was way past the eulogy. It was a speech of a lifetime about love and connection. And days, weeks, and even years after, people have shared with me what an impact that speech had on their life and what changes they made. And that is the most important thing. You want to impact people. but to a point where they actually take it home and make changes in their lives. And hearing that, I knew, like, I'm still getting goosebumps now. It was
Mm.
just something that was so Rob and I. We so wanted to impact the world with love and connection. And that speech at his eulogy definitely did that. I'm going to add one more thing very quickly. I don't
Yeah.
want to sidetrack too much, but there was his equivalent in his job. There were two of them. They shared a large region, basically all of Australia. And he came to me after the funeral and he said, "Your speech really changed my life, Marie." He said it to me. And yesterday, last night, just before we come live here, how perfect, he put a post on LinkedIn that he has started a movement for men's health. And he was in the same job with my husband in a prestige tool company. I'm going to name it Snap-on Tool. And he was unhappy. He was not happy there. And now he's doing that. And it was all that knock-on effect. And gosh, that's 7.5 years later. And I watched him unfold. And it just makes my day. It makes me so happy. I'm so proud of him. Yeah. Thanks, babe.
And that's just one person that was in the audience.
Exactly. And there were
I'm sure you've
500,
Yeah, and I'm sure that you've heard from multiple people, but just to share that one story of that's what a speech can do. It can change someone's life. It doesn't have to be overnight. Sometimes it does take time. I remember, and we're going to talk about your books also because, like I just think writing something for the audience to take home is such a gift for the audience. I remember, I'd written my first book and I was speaking for this large company and like everybody got a copy of my first book. And I had the second book, Marie, that was half done. And I was dragging my feet because I was like, does this really this just seems like a lot of work. I don't know what I'm doing this for. I finished with this large insurance company. And 2 days later, I get an email from somebody who was in the audience. And she was like, she said, "Your speech moved me. And I read your book from cover to cover, and it has changed my life." And you know what I did? I was like, I have to finish that second book. Like, there's a reason why, I just needed more of an oomph to go and finish it. But this just brings me back to, we just never know the impact of our words.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're like seeds. Sometimes they take a little while.
Oh, 100%. That's such a beautiful vision, what you just said, Laurie-Ann. We are planting seeds with our words. And then when we see the feedback, and every now and then I get an email out of nowhere or a private message out of nowhere where people send me the deepest, most beautiful thank you notes about having changed their lives, because grief is a really intense and heavy topic. And I don't think it has to be. I really do bring more lightness into this topic where nobody expects it, but everybody needs it, And when I do receive the message and I see how these seeds have grown and what has happened, and dare I say, has saved lives, and that to me is where I wish people would understand how much impact that has on us as the conveyor of the message, as the bearer of all these words that plant those seeds. Because when they come back to us and we see what a difference it makes, it's such an up spiraling effect, and then we share more and then we get more. And it's almost like that giving and receiving that forms a beautiful connection that we all need. We are all starving for connection in this world where we are so much more connected through internet. And this disconnection happens because all we do is, even you and I sit on screen, but I feel so connected to you. And that is just the beauty of what we do. But you also know, because you're doing it, what a difference it makes when you're standing on an actual stage and you can feel the audience and you can talk to them. It's just absolutely beautiful to have that.
It is. And I want to kind of go back to you having that vision and seeing yourself on a stage and just kind of knowing okay, maybe that's that next step that I'm supposed to be taking. It's almost like our message comes through us.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just think of like, sometimes I literally think, where did those words come
Where they
from?
will come from. Like downloads, things.
They are downloads.
Absolutely. Mm.
And we are here to share a message. We never know the impact it's going to have. We never know when it's going to impact somebody. And we never know, was it meant for the person that's in the audience? Or maybe they had to go home or tell a friend or call a friend, or just have a
Simple as
conversation later with somebody, and it impacts that person's life as well. So there's such a ripple effect to us sharing our message, whether that's because you've got a podcast, you do it as a live stream, your books, your speaking, your coaching, your programs, same thing. Same thing. Let's talk about your book because, like I did a whole series last summer, all throughout August, about using a book as your stage, because that's what I consider it to be. I mean, I say over and over again, speaking needs to be redefined.
Yeah.
Stages
Yeah.
needs to be redefined. And I just think a book is such a beautiful way to be sharing your message. Oh, I'm going to tell you a story first before we dive into your writing.
Leaning in.
My first book, the first edition, the first print run, had my phone number in it. In case somebody wanted to call me. Yes, I know. Okay. An older woman called me.
Yeah.
I think she was in her 70s because I'm pretty sure she told me. I still have the voice message on my phone.
Oh my gosh.
She found my book at the grocery store, like this little bin of used books, $1. $1 for every book that you wanted. And she picked up my book, and the book was called Rethink Leadership: 4 Lessons to Make You Remarkable. And she called me and told me, I have never read a book from cover to cover since I was in high school. And then she proceeded to tell me like how wonderful the book was. And she's like, and here are the lessons. And I may be 70 years old or in her 70s. She goes, but here's what I'm going to do. I was literally in the car. I was crying listening
That's
to
so
this.
beautiful. I love that.
So for anybody if you have a book idea, it's kind of like Marie's, like she saw herself speaking on a stage. Like sometimes you just have to take action on that download and move towards it.
I like, it's interesting because the whole moment of standing on stage at my husband's funeral, as I said, there's definitely a different focus, but I remember having this feeling of like, oh my God, there it is. I'm doing it, And then last month I was standing on stage of the Sydney Opera House and shared our story with our sons in the audience, a physical audience for the first time. They've seen me speak so many times online, but they walk past when I do things, and that's just how it is when you're a sole parent working from home. And we were just talking about that before we went live. Having the working from home, and then the teenagers are home, and then they're too loud. I'm like, do I need an office again? I don't want an office. I'm not happy to be here, But standing on stage at the Sydney Opera House, I had never been inside the Sydney Opera House. And then the first time I go inside, I'm standing on stage and sharing our story and having Flynn and Jed. And it turned out to be that way. They are introverts. They are not the ones that would pick first row or, here it's me, watch me, whatever. But they sat right in the middle of the audience. Center. They were right in the middle, and they sat there. And I'll never forget the moment when I delivered my closing line. The final line of my speech was, because love teaches you to see infinite possibilities beyond grief. And I looked at them, and infinite possibilities was the theme of the night. And my speech was called Beyond Grief. So it was the perfect finishing line. And I just looked at them when I delivered it. And from them, I looked into the whole audience, and there was this moment of, it was so surreal. I have no words. It was so surreal being on stage of the Sydney Opera House. Never in a million years would I have pictured myself. It's not one of those things like, oh yeah, I manifested that for years. No, I never even saw me on that stage. And then all of a sudden, yeah,
There
all
you
part of the
were.
journey, isn't it? Yeah,
It really is. And because I have been to Australia,
Mm.
I've been in the Sydney Opera
Amazing.
House. So like
Yeah,
I can picture being in the audience.
yeah.
How did that all come to be? Who did you speak for? How did that gig
Goodness.
happen?
So that gig was really, really special to me because I need to put a huge shout out there to a lovely lady called Monica Rosenfeld, who had a dream during COVID about creating something that we now all know as stories that stir. So think TEDx, but way more on an emotional level. And it's all about literally sharing stories from heart to heart with people. And here comes my cat. See, she's during their life. Um,
It's just real
she
life,
needs a
Marie.
little shout out. She needs a little shout out too because my poor cat has been bitten by a snake last week. She's my little snake bite survivor. It
Oh,
was absolutely touch and go, and that's why she's not allowed out. So loud complains that she still has to stay inside. How dare me? Um, Back to Monica Rosenfeld, Stories That Stir. And I spoke on her stage for the first time last year, I believe in May. And I didn't know at that stage, pardon the pun, that Dale Beaumont was in the audience. And Dale Beaumont, for those who don't know, is one of the international renowned business coaches, absolutely beautiful person. And he runs something that's called Business Blueprint, which is a 4-day event for business, like for a really high leadership event. Everybody knows him for that. And Monica said to me afterwards, like, oh, Dale was in the audience and he really wants you to speak on his stage. I'm like, wow, okay. And at that stage, no idea who he was. Don't tell anyone, but I didn't know who he was. So I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. And then I'm going home and I'm Googling his name. I'm like, my jaw just dropped. I'm like, I'm speaking on Dale's stage. Oh my God. And everybody, like my coaching friends I talked to, like, oh my God, he's speaking on Dale's stage. And I was like, I didn't know who he was until that day. I even told him later. We laughed about it, but it was just so beautiful because, a few months later, I'm standing on this stage, and that was the biggest stage at that time that I'd ever spoken to. It was 700 people. And on his stage, I received my first standing ovation, which is amazing. So I was the first speaker of the night. The Stories That Serve event usually has 6 speakers, 3 speakers, a quick break, and then another 3 speakers. There's always a topic. The topic of the night was dreams. And then through my friendship that I developed with Monica, and we are all big dreamers, all big believers. And there was this idea that she had, that she manifested. I want to bring Stories That Stir to the Opera House. And I'm like, I'll come. And she's like, yeah, you'll be there. Like, it's just, this moment where it was sort of quirky and joking, but we both knew it was absolute truth in that moment already. It was absolutely, well, there's no way that we're not going to do that. And yeah, so it happened. 7th of October this year, I stood on the stage and it was so surreal and so beautiful. And these heart-to-heart connections, that's the most beautiful part about it all.
And what I also want to point out for the people that are listening is like speaking really is a relationship business.
Yeah,
And
so
it's like
is.
one thing leads to another that leads to another. You just never know who's in the audience.
Yeah.
And you never know who the person that books you, that asks you to speak, you just never know who they know
Yeah.
that they can introduce you
That's the
to.
exact thing, because I also developed a really beautiful friendship, not only because we live in the same town, but also because we have so many things in common. And she's also a speaker. Not a shout out. I'm throwing around names today, but they all deserve this shout out. Sarah Rowan, she is an artist and she's a speed painter and speaker.
Oh,
Absolutely beautiful. She's on stage with both hands, drawing a picture in like 4 or 5 minutes while she's delivering a speech. She's incredible. And through her, I came to an event with Peter Merritt, who was the Australian keynote speaker of the year last year. I already knew him and absolutely adore him. He's absolutely brilliant. And Peter and Doug Libb, who is from Disney University, they put an all-day event together, and I have no words to describe this event. And I went last week. Last week I stood there and I met Doug Libb, Disney. It was just, I'm like, oh my God, we're standing there and I'm telling him my story, and there were all these people lining up and they wanted to speak to him. And I said, look, my cat star is coming into the video. Thank you. You're not supposed to be on a table. It's so live here. So I'm talking to Doug, and I said, no, look, there's people waiting for us. And he held my arm and he said, no, I want to hear your story. And he was so drawn into my story, and all the people were waiting to chat to him. And I was like, all right, I'm having this chat with Doug, I guess. It was just so beautiful. But people feel when you're genuine, people feel that connection. And so do I. We know when people are genuinely drawn into that connection with you, wanting to talk to you. And we all know these moments. We've been in the lineup and we've been in the connection moment, and it's just beautiful to have that.
Yeah, really, especially today in this day and age with, AI, just becoming like the spotlight is so on AI, and, connection, human connection, you like a robot cannot do. I mean, people, like, we intuitively know when we see a post that was written by AI, watch a video that was created
Yeah.
by AI, like, you just know. And
Yeah.
what does it do? It pushes us away a little bit, and it draws us closer to, where are my humans?
Yeah.
Where are my people that I need to be with? But tell me about your latest book, please, because that's something that I know that it just recently came out, and this
I
is
timed it in
what
a
number?
way. That's
This is
book
your
number 4.
Yeah, number 4.
So
Thank you.
I've written and published 4 books, and I've also co-authored 4 books, and it all happened. It was such a whirlwind because just before I went on stage, literally the week before, 2 weeks before, book number 4 that I have co-written, where I shared one of my stories in there, came out, and that book landed on in the Amazon #1 bestseller list, but it also landed on New York Times Square on a big billboard. And it was just so incredible thinking, oh my God, that book is on the Times Square on a big billboard. And then I'm standing on stage on the Sydney Opera House. I'm like, what's next? It's like, this is just amazing. Like, and people look at you and you have this instant authority when you're on stage. But then you're standing on stage, and there's also that little girl in you that goes like, oh my God, this is all happening. I'm so excited. It feels like Christmas, And there's also that grown-up woman that really owns her story and that knows what's gone into coming to that stage and the story behind it, why I'm actually here and what I want to share. And it's all coming together. So I spoke on stage at the Sydney Opera House on the Tuesday. And then on a Friday in the same week, my 4th book was coming out, which is called My Person Died, What Now? It is a grief guide with a positive twist. And I had this book on my mind, like you said, for a really long time. And in my head, I had written most of the book already, that I hadn't sat down to actually put words to paper. Funny that we still say paper, although we all know we type it on screen. But yeah, you know what I mean. So that book came together, and as I was writing the book, and the book was supposed to have 4 parts. The one goes to the griever, 1 to the support person, 1 is recommendations, and 1 is helplines. And I was 3/4 of the way through it. I was almost done with the book, and then I had this download while I'm reading through the book and rereading it and rewriting and all of that stuff that you do in the editing phase. I was like, hold on, there's something really important missing. And I went to my boys and I said to them, I believe it needs a children's perspective in there. Would you want to be part of this book and share your story from your side? And both of them were like, yeah. I'm like, I did not expect a yes. I have to be honest. I did not expect a yes. I expected, Mom, the teenager wave, I call it. And I got a resounding yes from both of them. I'm like, this is amazing. So the chapter is now the 2nd chapter. I cushioned it between to the griever and to the support person because that's where it really felt so nicely nestled in. And I did it in a Q&A style. I gave them all these questions that I wanted to have answered for the reader. And it was all about, how did you feel supported? How did you go in the community? How did you go with our immediate family? How did you feel supported at school, with your friends, with your extended family? I wanted all of it. And every question had the side question, what could have been done better for you to feel more supported? And I think that is something we all need. I'm still getting goosebumps when I just think about the impact that could have. The whole idea of, and I was so surprised, especially by my younger son, how much he has opened up. And I remember there was one stage where I read it and I had to swallow hard, and I said, you know that the whole world could potentially read this? And he said, yep. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's unfiltered. I did not edit anything. I did not tell them, oh, you shouldn't say that, or, if such and such could see that. I discussed it with them because I wanted them to have the awareness. They're 15 and 17, so they are grown up enough, but also they don't have that life experience yet, where I wanted them to understand what impact that would have, and that some of their teachers might read the book and just said, maybe some of the teachers, we don't need to name them by name. They said, yeah, I agree. I'm like, okay. But it was also important not to name and shame a teacher, but for teachers to understand what they could do differently to support their kids better. I know roughly some of the numbers in the States, but here in Australia, 1 in 20 children loses one or both parents before they turn 18. 1 in 20.
Really?
Yes. And that is a number that really shocked me. I had no idea.
Shocking.
There are some states in America where it's even higher. There's one state, unfortunately, I cannot remember which one it was, but I worked, I had a couple of interviews and discussions with a beautiful organization called Children's Collaborative. And they told me there's one state, I wish I would know which one it is now, where it's 1 in 4, because the crime rate is so high. And my heart cracked. Like, seriously, there was this moment of, I cannot even imagine, especially with the high crime rate, how kids would grow up in so much fear and with so much loss. That is something where I feel there's so much work to be done in the grief space, because it's still a topic that is half charged, put it under the rug. We don't talk about death or dying or grief. We know it's heavy, and then there's all these myths around, oh, grief is just an expression how much we loved. I don't agree with all of that. I don't agree with that whole trying to make it sound like the more you love, the more you need to grieve. I love continuing the love and connection Rob and I had. That's how I want to show how much I loved him, not in no space how much I grieve and stay stuck in the sadness. That's not what we wanted for each other. We both wanted, if something was to ever happen to us, we had that conversation 3 years before Rob actually died. And Rob died from a very sudden death. So it's not that we had that conversation because we knew it's going to happen. We thought that conversation was theory. But the outcome was, if something was to happen to me, I want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. Because that's what love is, not the other side of grief. Love wants you to be happy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that story, as I was quickly off here on the side trying to figure out what state that was, and I couldn't. But if you think of it, that's just so interesting that there's that many children who lose a parent before the age of 18. Like, that's that's just so devastating. But again, thank you for putting a spotlight on that. And again, that's why we're coaches. That's why we're speakers. That's why we're authors. That's why we're podcasters, is to share this information with others. And that's how we are having a bigger and bigger impact. Marie, thank you so much for coming on here, sharing so much fun, so much joy, like hearing your story, how you gave a eulogy. I've got another friend, she just lost her husband very recently, and I heard like amazing things. I was not there. I heard amazing
Mhm.
things about her eulogy, and people said
Beautiful.
because she's a pro, she is a speaker, and
Yeah.
like our friend Steve Gamlin, same thing. He
Yeah.
was able
Bless
to
him.
do that. So thank you so much. Where can people find you, follow you, learn from you, and most importantly, this new book?
Yeah. I think the best way is simply to go to mariealessi.com. It's my website. You find everything there, my books, my courses, there's like a little book a chat button if you want to talk to me directly. I do not have my phone number. Yeah, you can find all my books there. Anything that you want to know or talk about, and if you feel like, hey, I don't even know where to start, can we have a chat? Book a chat with me, and we'll take it from there. This is not a sales call. I'm going to say that right here. This is a real connection call, and see what I can do for you, or who I could refer you to, or what direction could I point you into, whatever happens on the call. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. I am so glad that our good friend Steve Gamlin introduced us, from
Yes.
across the
Likewise.
globe. Like you're a
Yeah.
day ahead of me. I'm always fascinated by that. So thank you for getting
Yeah.
up early to do this podcast interview.
You're
And
very welcome.
until next week, I want you to be in demand. Hey, before you go, do you want to learn how to turn every talk into clients and cash? Well, check out my brand new limited series podcast, Public Speaking Monetization Tips. You'll learn how to find speaking opportunities, monetize every stage, and use your voice as your most powerful marketing tool. Whether you're a coach, a consultant, or an expert, this series will help you speak smarter, not harder. Search for Public Speaking Monetization Tips on your favorite podcast app and start listening today.